I'm Lila. My life was straightforward, just work and home. I worked as a web designer, and my days were filled with coding, designing, and client meetings, all from the comfort of my home. I was good at what I did, and it showed in my bank balance. It wasn't always like this. A year ago, my life was a mess after a horrible breakup. I had sworn off relationships, focusing only on work. But then, I met Ethan at a friend's party. Ethan came up to me with a simple, "Hi, I'm Ethan. You're Lila, right?" His voice was calm and steady, no airs, no pretense. "Yes, that's me," I replied, taking in his casual attire and easygoing smile. We talked about everything that evening, from movies to our hobbies. He mentioned he worked in sales and seemed to enjoy his job. "You must love what you do," he commented after I explained my work. "I do," I smiled. "It's more than just a job for me." He nodded, and we continued chatting for what felt like hours. By the end of the evening, we had exchanged numbers. It wasn't long before our casual chats turned into dates, and our dates turned into serious discussions about our future together. Ethan was different from the men I'd known. He was kind, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. I remember our third date distinctly. We were sitting in a small cafe, and he handed me a bouquet of flowers. "For you," he said simply. "Oh, Ethan, they're lovely," I replied, taken aback by the gesture. "I thought they'd make you smile," he grinned. We dated for a few months, and everything felt perfect. So when Ethan proposed, I didn't hesitate. We had a simple wedding and moved in together. My house, spacious and filled with the memories of my single life, now echoed with our shared laughter. However, things took a turn when Ethan came home one day looking distressed. "I lost my job, Lila," he began, avoiding my gaze. I was stunned, but tried to be understanding. "It's okay, Ethan. We'll manage. You'll find another job soon." He looked relieved. "Thank you for understanding. I promise I'll make this right." I believed him. Truly I did. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, with Ethan not working and his job interviews leading nowhere, my patience began to wear thin. As the days went by, my trust in Ethan waned, replaced by an unsettling anxiety. Our financial situation was still stable thanks to my job, but Ethan's attitude towards employment became increasingly lackadaisical. One evening, I overheard him talking on the phone. "Yes, Mom, I'm taking care of everything. Lila's just doing her little web designing thing, but I'm handling the big stuff." That conversation irked me. Was he implying that he was the primary earner? A week later, his sister Elsie dropped by for a visit. She and I never really got along. Our beliefs and lifestyles were polar opposites. She had chosen a life completely centered around her home and husband, a choice I respected but couldn't understand. The moment she walked in, she started inspecting the place. "Lila, don't you ever dust around here?" she commented, running her finger along a shelf. "We've both been busy, Elsie," I said, trying to remain calm. She smirked. "Well, maybe if you focused less on work and more on your home." "Elsie, Lila's doing a lot, okay? You don't need to come here and criticize." Ethan quickly interjected, trying to mediate. Elsie raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I know you're taking care of everything, Ethan. I just feel bad you married someone who can't even keep a house tidy." I was fuming. "Elsie, it's not just my job to keep the house clean. Ethan lives here too." Ethan glanced at me, then at his sister, a silent plea in his eyes. "Let's not discuss this here," he said softly. Elsie smirked. Of course, wouldn't want to make things uncomfortable. But remember, Ethan, a man's role is to provide. I was left seething as Elsie sauntered out, leaving a trail of tension in her wake. Later that evening, I tried talking to Ethan. "Why does Elsie think you're the main provider? Why is she under the impression that I'm just sitting around doing nothing?" Ethan looked uncomfortable. "Look, Lila, I might have mentioned to her that I'm handling a lot of things. I didn't want her or Mom thinking less of me because I'm not working." "That doesn't give you the right to belittle my contribution, Ethan. We're supposed to be a team," I replied, frustration evident in my voice. Ethan sighed. "I'm sorry, Lila. I'll clear things up with Elsie and Mom. Please give me some time." The days that followed were full of tension. Every morning, as I settled into my home office, the same nagging thought kept bothering me. Was Ethan being truthful? How much more was he keeping from me? It was one evening, as I sat down to pay some bills, that I noticed something off. A hefty amount had been transferred monthly from our joint account to an unfamiliar one. Curiosity piqued, I decided to dig deeper. I approached Ethan as he lounged on the couch. "Hey, I noticed some transfers from our account. Do you know anything about it?" Ethan looked up, startled. "Oh, yeah, that's just some money I've been sending to Mom to help her out." I raised an eyebrow. "Help her out? With what? And why didn't you tell me?" He hesitated. "Well, she has some expenses, and since I'm not working, I thought I'd support her with our savings." I was taken aback. "Ethan, that's our money. We should be discussing these things together. It's a considerable amount." Ethan looked away. "I didn't think it was a big deal, Lila. She's family." Frustration bubbled up. "But so am I. Why didn't you talk to me about this?" I didn't want you to worry," he muttered. My voice began to tremble with anger. "Ethan, keeping secrets, especially about money, isn't right. We made a commitment to each other. This isn't how it's supposed to work." He sighed. "I know, Lila. I didn't want to feel useless. I wanted to at least do something for my family since I can't for ours right now." I looked at him, tears in my eyes. "But you are doing something. You're sharing your life with me. We need trust and transparency. Without that, what do we have?" Ethan lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry, Lila. I messed up." I took a deep breath. "We need to fix this, Ethan, starting with being honest about everything." He nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I promise, no more secrets." But as the night wore on and I lay in bed, I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. In the wake of our last conversation, things felt even more strained between Ethan and me. Though he promised transparency, my own curiosity led me on a path to uncover the depth of his deception. One evening, as Ethan went out under the guise of another job seminar, I decided to do a little detective work. Going through our financial statements, I traced back every transaction to his mother's account. The sums were large, far more than one would need for general assistance. I picked up my phone and called my friend Jane, who worked at a bank. "Hey, Jane, I need a favor," I began, hesitating. "Can you help me look into an account? I think something's off." There was a pause on the other line before Jane replied, "Lila, you know that's not exactly legal." "I know, but I'm desperate," I admitted. "I promise. I won't get you in trouble." After hearing my story, Jane hesitated for a moment and then said, "Okay, send me the account number. I'll see what I can do." A day later, she called me back with information that confirmed my suspicions. "Lila," Jane began, her voice low, "the money Ethan's sending to his mother? It's not just sitting there. It's being funneled into an investment account, and the amounts are substantial." My heart sank. "Investment account?" "Yes, and the worst part is, it's under both his mother's and his name." I was speechless. Not only was he giving away our savings, but he was also making investments without informing me. "Jane, thank you," I managed, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Lila," she replied. I sat in our living room, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. How could he? When Ethan returned later that evening, I confronted him, papers scattered all over our coffee table. "Ethan, we need to talk." He took one look at the bank statements and paled. "Lila?" "Why, Ethan, why did you lie to me?" I demanded. Ethan swallowed hard. Mom convinced me it was a good investment. She said we'd double our money in no time. I thought I was doing it for us." "But it's our money, Ethan," I exclaimed. "You can't make decisions like this on your own. We're supposed to be partners." He sat down, defeated. "I know. I messed up. I thought I could surprise you, show you I was contributing." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. By lying? By betraying my trust? Ethan looked away, guilt evident in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Lila. I should have talked to you." The truth was out, but the damage was done. Could our relationship withstand the strain of so many lies? The atmosphere in the house was as cold and quiet as a winter morning. After uncovering Ethan's deceit, I was determined to keep my composure, but I found myself rattled whenever I remembered the mistruths. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed to be avoiding the topic entirely. Just as I sat down at my computer, the front door burst open. Before I could react, Lydia, Ethan's mother, and Elsie stormed into the living room. "You shameless woman!" Lydia's voice cut through the air. "All you do is sit on your behind and suck the life out of my son." Elsie chimed in with a smirk. "Always knew you were a leech, just waiting to latch on to someone better off." I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts before replying. "I'm the one working and earning here. Ethan hasn't been for months." Ethan stood off to the side, his eyes darting between us. I hoped, expected, that he would say something, defend me. But he remained silent. Lydia, her face red with rage, took a step forward. "You expect us to believe that? My son has been the one supporting this family. You've just been enjoying his hard work." Elsie nodded in agreement. "Honestly, I don't know what he saw in you. You're just a lazy housewife, living off someone else's money." Their words were like salt on an open wound. But more painful than their false accusations was Ethan's silence. He just stood there, watching the scene unfold without uttering a word in my defense. Taking a deep breath, I stood tall and looked straight into Lydia's eyes. "All I ask is for the money Ethan transferred to you, returned. It's rightfully ours, not just his." Lydia's face twisted in rage. "How dare you? That's my son's money, and I'll decide what to do with it." Despite the fury in her eyes, I didn't waver. "It's our money, Lydia. Earned by me, not him." She stared at me for a moment, the room silent except for our heavy breathing. Then, with a huff, she turned on her heel, Elsie following close behind. "This isn't over!" Lydia spat as she stormed out of the house. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving a lingering echo. I turned to Ethan, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just looked down, avoiding my gaze. The gravity of the situation weighed heavily on me. Not only was there deceit about money, but I was also fighting a battle with his family on my own. His silence hurt more than any deceit ever could. A few days after the confrontation, I sat in my home office, distracted by everything that had occurred. The tranquility of my workspace, usually a haven for creativity, now felt stifling. Taking a sip from my coffee, I pondered on how to reclaim my dignity and pride. The first step was clear. I accessed my online bank, scrutinizing every transaction, noting down each suspicious transfer. The amount Ethan had funneled to his mother was staggering. Money I had earned with sweat and sleepless nights, taken without my knowledge. A message pinged on my computer. It was from Lucy, a friend since college, and also a brilliant lawyer. I had confided in her about the whole situation, and she was eager to help. "Hey, I've looked into your situation. Let's meet for lunch?" her message read. We met at a quiet bistro, away from prying eyes. "So," Lucy began, stirring her iced tea, "I've been doing some digging, and I think we have a solid case here. It's about time we put Ethan and his family in their place." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I just want what's rightfully mine, Lucy. I can't let them get away with this." Lucy's eyes gleamed with determination. "Trust me, they won't." Weeks turned into a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and strategy sessions. Lucy and I, along with a team she'd put together, found evidence not only of Ethan's deceit, but also questionable transactions involving Lydia's accounts. It was a spiderweb of lies and deceit, with Ethan and Lydia at its center. One evening, after another exhaustive session, Lucy looked at me and said, "It's time. Let's serve them the papers." The next morning, Lucy and I drove to Lydia's place. Ethan's car was parked outside. Perfect. We rang the bell, and Elsie answered, her face a mask of fake surprise. "Oh, it's you," she sneered. "We're not here for games," I said coldly. "Is Ethan here?" Before Elsie could reply, Ethan emerged from the living room. His confident smirk vanished as Lucy handed him an envelope. "You're being sued," she said crisply. "For fraud and theft. I'd advise you to get a lawyer." His face paled. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed. "No, what's ridiculous is you stealing from your wife and lying about it," I retorted. Lydia appeared at the door, her eyes scanning the scene. "What's going on here?" "You might want to read this too," Lucy said, handing her another envelope. As Lydia read the documents, her face went from smug to horrified. "You can't do this." I stood tall, all the pain and humiliation fueling my resolve. "I can, and I am. See you in court." Walking away from that house, with Lucy by my side, I felt a weight lifted. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about standing up for myself when others tried to push me down. It was about reclaiming my power. And it was served cold. As the days drew closer to our court date, I braced myself for the inevitable backlash. I knew Lydia and Ethan wouldn't go down without a fight. And while I was emotionally ready, I didn't expect them to bring the battle right to my doorstep. It was a chilly evening when my doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, I saw them, Lydia, Elsie, and Ethan, their faces a cocktail of anger and determination. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Thought you'd ambush us with that lawsuit, did you?" Lydia spat out, taking a step inside. Ethan and Elsie trailed behind her, blocking the exit. "Calm down, Lydia. This isn't a good look for you," I replied evenly. "You think you can just humiliate us in public? Drag our name through the mud?" Elsie snapped, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's simple," I replied coolly. "Return the money, and this ends." Ethan, who had been silent till now, looked at me with a mix of frustration and sadness. "Is this how you want things to end? By suing your own family?" "Family?" I echoed, my voice icy. "A family doesn't steal from each other. A family doesn't lie and degrade one another." He sighed. "I made a mistake, but taking us to court? That's extreme." "It's justice," I responded, "and I'm not dropping the case." Lydia, crimson with rage, glared at me. "We won't let you tarnish our reputation. You're going to regret this." "Is that a threat?" I countered. "Everything I've done is legal. Can you say the same?" "Enough!" Ethan shouted. "This is getting us nowhere." I fixed him with a steely gaze. "You're right. It's clear where we all stand. Now, I suggest you leave." Elsie sneered. "You may have gotten the upper hand now, but remember, the courts haven't decided anything yet." "We'll see," I replied confidently. As they left, the tension in the room was palpable, but I stood my ground. They had come to intimidate, to make me doubt my course. But it had the opposite effect. Their visit only solidified my decision. There was no turning back now, and whatever the outcome, I was ready. The day of the court hearing arrived quicker than I anticipated. As I entered the building, my heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing the resolute beat of my heart. There was a thrum of anticipation in the air, and I could feel eyes on me, but I remained focused, my gaze unwavering. Sitting across the room, Lydia, Elsie, and Ethan whispered among themselves, casting furtive glances in my direction. Ethan looked especially worn out, his earlier confidence replaced by clear anxiety. Lydia, on the other hand, wore a mask of defiance, while Elsie's face was set in a frown, her eyes hard and calculating. The room fell silent as the judge entered, taking her place at the bench. "We are gathered here today to discuss the matter of financial fraud and theft," she began. "Present your case." My lawyer stepped forward, presenting the evidence of the unauthorized transfers and Ethan's deception. The paper trail was undeniable, every detail meticulously recorded. The judge frequently glanced up from the documents, looking first at Ethan and then at me. Ethan's lawyer made a valiant attempt to argue that the money was gifted willingly, but the evidence against them was insurmountable. When Lydia was called to the stand, her arrogance was palpable. "That money was for my son," she declared. "It was only right that he should have it." "But it wasn't yours to take," I replied calmly when it was my turn to speak. "And it wasn't yours to keep," Lydia snapped, pointing a shaking finger at me. The judge interjected. "This isn't about family dynamics. This is about the law, and the law is clear on this matter." Hours seemed to stretch on as the proceedings continued. When the final verdict was read, vindication surged through me. Ethan was ordered to return every cent he had taken, and additional punitive damages were awarded to me for the deceit and emotional trauma. After the hearing, As I stepped out into the crisp air, I felt lighter than I had in months. This was more than just a legal victory. It was my emancipation from the shackles of deception, disrespect, and manipulation. Ethan approached, his face pale. "I'm sorry," he murmured, not meeting my eyes. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment I saw the man I had fallen in love with. But that image was quickly replaced by the reality of who he had become. "It's too late for sorry," I replied. As I walked away, I felt a sense of finality. It was the end of a painful chapter in my life, but it was also the beginning of a new one where I was in control, where I was free. That evening, as I sat in my home, the silence was soothing. There were no more whispers, no more deceit, no more games. I had reclaimed my life, my dignity, and my peace. And as the sun set, casting a warm golden hue across the room, I knew that tomorrow would be a new day, full of promise and endless possibilities.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.